Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Islamic Economics Series. Today, we're going to explore a framework that really, truly changes how we think about human well-being and development. It's Amartya Sen's capability approach. And, this isn't just about things like GDP or how much money someone has. It pushes us to ask a much deeper question. What are people actually free to do and to be?
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll walk through this whole idea in 6 main parts. We're going to start by looking at the ideas Sen was arguing against, and then, piece by piece, we'll build up to his much richer, more human-focused vision of what a good life can be.
All right, so first things first. To really get what Sen is doing, you have to understand what he was trying to fix. And that starts with questioning the very tools we normally use to measure how well people are doing.
Really think about it. For a long time, standard economics has basically boiled down a good life to one of two things. Either how much money you have, or how happy you say you are. Right? We measure GDP per capita, or we ask people to rate their happiness on a scale. But is that it? Does that really capture the whole story? Sen's argument is that no, not only is it incomplete, it can be seriously misleading.
And his critique here is pretty broad. He looks at some of the biggest theories out there. You've got utilitarianism, which is all about happiness or pleasure. You've got what he calls opulence views, which are obsessed with income and wealth. And even some really sophisticated theories of justice that talk about primary goods or resources. Sen says they all make the same fundamental mistake. They're all focused on the means to living, the tools, the stuff, the money, instead of the actual life that people are able to lead.
Okay, so if the old ways of measuring are flawed, what's the alternative? Well, Sen builds his entire framework from the ground up, and he starts with this foundational concept he calls functionings. This is really the bedrock of the whole approach.
So what exactly is a functioning? The idea is actually pretty simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. A functioning is any of the various things a person actually manages to do or to be. Think of them as the building blocks of a life. It's not about what you own. It's about your actual lived state of being.
And these beings and doings can range from the really basic to the highly complex. On one hand, it's about being properly fed, being healthy, not dying prematurely. But it's also about more complex things, like having self-respect, being able to participate in your community, or even the simple dignity of being able to go out in public without feeling ashamed. These are the real things that make up a human life.
Now, knowing what a person is doing, their functionings, is only one half of the picture. The real game changer in Sen's work comes when we shift our focus from what someone achieves to what is actually possible for them. And that brings us to the core idea, capability.
So, capability is not about the specific life you're living. It's about the set of all the different lives that are genuinely available to you. It's like looking at a whole menu of options, not just the one dish you ended up ordering. So your capability set is, in essence, your real freedom to choose a life that you have reason to value.
This example right here makes the difference between functionings and capability totally clear. You have two people who are not eating. On the surface, their functionings is identical, but their situations are worlds apart. The person who is starving has no other option. They lack the capability to be nourished. The person who is fasting, however, is choosing not to eat from a range of options that absolutely includes eating well. Same achievement, but a completely different level of freedom, a different capability. Okay, to really get the sophistication here, we need to unpack two more distinctions Sen makes. He gives us this really refined framework for thinking about what personal advantage even means. So, first, he says we need to separate a person's own well-being from their broader agency goals. Your agency goals might be things you care about that aren't just for you, like fighting for a cause or protecting the environment. And second, as we just saw, he makes that crucial distinction between achievement, what you actually do, and the freedom to achieve, your capability. And when you put those two distinctions together, you get this really useful 4-part grid. So we can look at someone's achieved well-being. How are they actually doing? But we can also look at their well-being freedom. What were their options for well-being? Did they have choices? Same thing on the agency side. We can ask, did they achieve their goals? Or we could ask, what was their agency freedom? How much real opportunity did they have to pursue the causes they believed in? It's just a much richer way of seeing things.
Now, this isn't just abstract theory. This framework has massive real-world implications, and you see it most clearly when we start talking about how we understand and fight poverty.
So how do we normally define poverty? It's almost always about money, right? We draw a poverty line, let's say $2 a day, and anyone with an income below that line is considered poor. It's a simple, neat number. But is it right? The capability approach makes us stop and ask a much better question. Is having $2 a day really the same for everyone? I mean, is it the same for a healthy young man versus an elderly person with a chronic illness? Or for someone living in a city with great public transit versus someone in a rural area with none?
And the answer, of course, is no. A person's ability to convert income into a good life, into real functionings, depends on so many things. Your own personal characteristics like your age or health, the social conditions around you like schools and healthcare, even the climate you live in. All of these things affect what a dollar can actually do for you.
And so, from this point of view, poverty isn't just a lack of income. It's something much deeper. It's a deprivation of the fundamental freedoms and opportunities to live a life you value. It is, at its core, a failure of basic capabilities. It completely reframes the problem.
Okay, finally, let's talk about what makes this approach so powerful. Its strength is not just in what it tells us to focus on, but just as much in what it tells us to reject. And maybe most importantly, in the questions it deliberately leaves unanswered.
And Sen himself says this. He argues that the real challenge, the real power of this idea lies in what it says no to.
It completely shifts what he calls the evaluative space, the very thing we use to judge whether a life or a society is going well. It says the ultimate value isn't happiness. It isn't a pile of resources. It isn't income. All those things are important, sure, but they're important as tools, as means to an end. The real end, the real goal, is the substantive freedom a person has to live a valued life.
And here's what's so fascinating. The approach is intentionally incomplete. Sen purposefully does not give us a fixed, universal list of the most important capabilities that everyone should have, and he does this for a very good reason.
Because the theory is incomplete, it hands the responsibility over to us. It forces a conversation. It says that deciding what a good life looks like isn't a job for an expert in an office somewhere. It's a job for all of us, through public discussion and democratic debate. The framework doesn't give us the answers. It gives us a better set of questions to ask together. It forces us to ask, what freedoms, what capabilities do we as a society truly value and want to promote for everyone?
See you in the next one. Subscribe, like, and comment.